we actually have a younger brother, and he went to private school the same time as we did. And our dad he had a full-time job, and then he stopped being able to work because he got classified as a fully disabled veteran. So he was just unable to have a job. And our mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she wasn't working either. So what they did for our brother was they pulled him out of school and homeschooled him. And they sat down with us and told us that we could make the choice for ourselves, whether or not we wanted to figure out a way to stay in school or be homeschooled for the rest of our education. So it was kind of like a family discussion, like, hey, this is the reality. If you want to stay in private school, we as your parents probably can't afford it, but we can figure something out. So we made the decision, Ilena and I made the decision that we wanted to stay in private school.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm the host, David Fromm. Did you ever stop and think about the kind of education you were getting back when you were in school? Or did you just show up every day because that's what you're supposed to do? These days, things are shifting. More and more families are starting to look around at different education options besides public school. And here's the cool part. More and more states are stepping up, passing laws that let the money flow to the student and the family instead of funding a system. So, for families that don't live in a state that has passed school choice, what are they doing to afford it? Well, some are taking on extra work, either a second job or a side hustle, just, whatever it takes to be able to pay for that tuition. And in the case of two sisters who we're talking with today, they made the choice to work hard and actually pay their own way through private school. Now that they've graduated and moved on, they're turning around and using their voices to help students in Montana get the freedom to choose the kind of education that works best for them. I want to welcome Ilena Levitt and her sister, Meleana, also known as Mel Levitt, to the podcast to share their story. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And we're going to talk to this topic's pretty close to my heart. I do a lot of work on education. We actually homeschool our kids. I think education is such a powerful force in people's lives. And also from a policy standpoint, there's such great transformation going on. I'm so excited about it. So I'm excited for this conversation. But before we get started, I understand that one of you was rescued by Dog the Bounty Hunter. Who was that and how'd that happen?
Yep, that was me. So it's kind of a funny story. So my mom's Hawaiian. So we kind of grew up going back and forth to my grandparents' house up in Hawaii. And I was probably maybe 5 years old. And I had a babysitter, and our house is kind of on this cliff next to the water. And 5-year-old me somehow managed to scale down that entire cliff and was playing in the water. This whole time, the babysitter didn't even know it was missing, which is interesting as well. And so I was just playing around in the water, and then I felt this sting on my leg. And come to find out, I had just gotten stung by a Portuguese man-of-war.
Oh my gosh. That's like my nightmare. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't remember the fear or what I felt when I got stung, but I remember it hurting. And then kind of out of the blue, this giant man comes running through the forest and just kind of scoops me up and takes me up to the house up on the cliff or whatever. And this is all I remember is just this guy running towards me. And I was in pain, what little kids. I didn't remember much of that. And so he took me upstairs and set me on the counter or something like that. It was applying cucumbers to my leg to get the sting out and everything. And that's about as much as my memory as a 5-year-old remembers. And then come to find out, my mom's yeah, that was Dog the Bounty Hunter. He just saved your life, and it's putting cucumbers on it and stuff. And I remember we'd always watch some of his shows and stuff every once in a while. And he's big in Hawaii, so it's a big name. And so I'm oh, well, there you go. My brush with fame, almost the hands of Dog the Bounty Hunter.
That's so cool. I have a Dog the Bounty Hunter story that is so much less cool. It's incredible. I even hesitate to tell you, but no, I was at the New Jersey State Capitol, and we were lobbying with, it was actually, we were trying to advocate for women to be able to bake goods at home and then sell them without the government interfering. So we're walking around with mostly women who were just immigrants from Africa. And so they had like kind of African garb on, beautiful dresses. So we're walking around with them. And then all of a sudden, because there's apparently like a bail bill going on there, we're in the cafeteria eating, and Dog the Bounty Hunter and his whole crew, like all of them, like they're on the show, just wander on into the cafeteria to eat. And I'm like, wow, that's Dog the Bounty Hunter. This is awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there were no Portuguese man of war involved. It may have been having a cucumber, but it was a very different reason. Anyway, thanks for sharing that. That's super cool.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So your parents are very pro private school, and so why are they? Like, why is this type of education so important to them?
I think the biggest part is that the area that we grew up in, a lot of the private schools were severely underfunded and were not, like, test scores were really low. There was a lot of like police presence at these places. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of academic freedom either. And so they wanted something that was going to be, first of all, more safe and then more stable. And also, like, we grew up in a Christian family. And so they wanted a school that would allow us to explore that, which especially then public schools weren't really letting kids learn about that or explore that at all in their education. So that was really important to them.
Yeah. So then this was in Montana, right?
No, this was in Oregon.
Oh, awesome. In Oregon. What part of Oregon was it?
So we grew up in Hillsboro, but we went to private school our whole life. So we went to a school in Hillsboro, and then there was Beaverton, and then Lake Oswego. So it was a couple different places. Got
it. So I think, a lot of us, when we make decisions for our kids as to where they go, there's always a variety of factors. I mean, it's like, what are the academics like? Are they safe? Is it in line with the values that we believe in? There's just a lot of is going to meet the needs that my kids have. So what was the private school that you all went to like?
Yeah, so ours was, they title them classical education schools. So it's different than your normal private school. Yep. So what it is based off of the British schooling system. So they have like 3 parts where it's grammar, logic, rhetoric. So grammar's elementary, logic's middle school, rhetoric is high school. And what they do is they build up from like foundational building blocks to like a high school placement. And so with grammar school, you learn like, rote memorization, basic information, times and stuff. Logic school is when you learn to put those foundational facts into coherent sentences and arguments to defend it. And then in rhetoric school is kind of where you learn to like create a thesis. So you're kind of learning the same information over and over, but it gets deeper and more intense the further up in the levels you go.
Well, I've sent some of my kids to classical education school, and you explained it way better than I actually knew. I'm like, oh, that's what we were doing. But it was a phenomenal education because it really teaches you how to think, which is, no matter what you decide to do in life, it really is going to benefit you, because if you know how to think, then you're going to be able to tackle anything and deduce anything. And that's fabulous. So talk to me about like how, you ended up working almost full-time jobs to pay for school. Was it, it was just that like the family didn't have the money to send you to the school you wanted to go to? Like, take me through that decision-making process and how you decided to kind of go down that really strenuous path.
Yeah. So we actually have a younger brother, and he went to private school the same time as we did. And our dad he had a full-time job, and then he stopped being able to work because he got classified as a fully disabled veteran. So he was just unable to have a job. And our mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she wasn't working either. So what they did for our brother was they pulled him out of school and homeschooled him. And they sat down with us and told us that we could make the choice for ourselves, whether or not we wanted to figure out a way to stay in school or be homeschooled for the rest of our education. So it was kind of like a family discussion, like, hey, this is the reality. If you want to stay in private school, we as your parents probably can't afford it, but we can figure something out. So we made the decision, Ilena and I made the decision that we wanted to stay in private schools. So when we turned 16, we both got full-time jobs, and I was working anywhere from 35 to 40 hours a week, while doing school at the same time, and sports. So,
Oh, wow.
a whole mess
You're able
of
to do
things.
sports as well. Wow. What
Yeah,
was your job? What job
somehow.
did you work in?
We worked at Topgolf in Oregon.
Nice.
Yeah, not a bad gig, but yeah. So we made a decision as a family that we wanted to kind of like sacrifice our time, in order to have a job and stay at the school that we wanted to go to. So it was kind of a simple decision for us, I think, but it was definitely like group effort, like, our parents laying out the reality of what it is and telling us, you can make this choice, and we're not gonna force you to do one thing or the other, but whatever you want to do, we'll support it.
So just practically, I can't believe I actually said you were playing sports in addition to having a full-time job, and just in addition to going to school full-time. How did you balance all of that, stay on top of your academics and keep your jobs?
My parents, 100% my parents. Like without that support, there is no way we would have been able to do it, because they drove us everywhere. They like sat with us into the middle of the night when we did homework, so we wouldn't fall asleep. Like, having that support system was the only way we could have done it. And there was also the factor of like, we were enjoying our education because it was something that we chose. And so I think it was, at least for me, I don't want to speak for Ilena, but for me, it was easier to work for it because it was like my decision to do it. It wasn't like something that was being forced on me to do. Like I consciously made that choice. It was, I think, not as difficult, I don't think, as it sounds, because I was like wanting to do it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that when you're paying for your school, you really value that education that you're getting, because you're super connected to the cost, and most of my kids pay for their own college some way, and they're not just going to waste their time, because then they're just wasting their money. So it makes a ton of sense. So going through that experience, what did you, in addition to learning the value of the education, like the true value, what else did you take away from it that you feel like is going to benefit you just throughout adulthood?
I think honestly I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that they were pretty keen on not using textbooks or things that were written in a more modern time. So we went straight to like the primary sources. And so I think, like, especially since we've moved around a lot and been to schools in like different states, it's kind of interesting seeing how other states teach things in different schools, and how a lot of them now are shifting from primary text to like second, third, fourth, primary sources. And so I think for me, that's probably that was the biggest game changer for going to that private school, is the fact that I have the knowledge from the source itself and can build like arguments and debate in a way that is coming from somewhere that I know has been, trusted and tried and true to a sense, but it kind of helps you understand more the world you're living in, rather than hearing like from other teachers who've just been teaching and learned off of textbooks. Like there is something to be said about textbooks to like, for math and science and stuff like that. But there comes a point where like how much of that is just being written because people want to put their own truths into history rather than taking the real truth from it.
I would totally echo that when it comes to classical education. It's such an advantage because, man, you go back and read textbooks, even depending on, some old textbooks you see when they were written and all, and you're like, wow, I really can see that bias, or I can see that slant that's put on that. I get that, maybe not everybody can go and do primary source, but man, it should be more prevalent because I think it is so valuable. I think one of the things that does too, And this is where it was actually during the pandemic that I've focused on this a little more. It's like, sometimes we have people who don't believe that they can figure out stuff, that they can learn from themselves. They can look at whether it's data or, some that was written and, I'd consider primary source, and they can draw their own conclusions, that they need someone to give them those conclusions. And I think during, what we saw with COVID and how the pandemic unfolded and the aftermath of it, I think, we had a lot of people kind of wake up and say, hey, I can actually make my own decisions here, and I can digest a lot of information. I'm smart enough to try to figure out what's good for me and my family, what the truth is.
Yeah, well, and that was the cool thing, for me. Oh, that was the cool thing for me about, just the classical education system in general, because, you start with, rote memorization and facts, but, the point of ending it with the rhetoric phase is, we, our senior year, had to write, a 30-page thesis that was our own idea, and we had to present it to, pretty much every family that went to the school. And so, they get you to a point where it doesn't actually matter what facts you remember, because what they're doing is they're teaching you how to defend what you believe in and how to figure out what you believe in, rather than just, taking what everybody else is saying and, thinking about it and being like, okay, this is what I believe. They teach you to, critically think about things on your own, and they don't punish you for doing that. So, if they give you an assignment to write about something, whatever perspective you have is valid as long as you can back it up.
So, there's a lot of states all around the country. There's really been a movement over the last number of years where education savings accounts or refundable tax credits have been used now to help families afford the education choices they want to make for their family. And you guys living in Oregon didn't have that probably available to you. What do you if you had, let's say, $7,000-8,000 in a education savings account that you could have used towards your education per year, how would that have affected your decisions, or how would that have affected you?
I think the domino effect honestly would have been huge, because our family moved out of Oregon because we couldn't afford it anymore. Because the money that we were making to go to school had to go to school. It wasn't going toward housing or food or whatever. That was coming from a different source. So we, I think, probably would have been able to stay in Oregon. We wouldn't have had to move. And Ilena and I have talked about this a lot, but we don't have a college savings account. We never had a college savings account because the money we were making had to immediately go to private school. So
Right.
it even really affects the future, and is still affecting our future, where we're paying for college kind of as we go. And there wasn't anything saved up because we had to use it for high school, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. I think, when you look at those dollar amounts to, that the fact that you could have put that money towards college, you could have pushed it down the line a little bit, would have probably been a big deal. It doesn't mean you could have still worked just as hard and learned those lessons, or you could have maybe let that whole time breathe a little bit more. But I think it's, policy really matters. What the legislation people pass in different states really matters. And it makes a difference in people's lives. So I think that this is a great example of that. So you all moved, or lived in Montana, still live in Montana. And there was an effort to try to pass some education freedom reform there this year, which was unsuccessful, but we're still very hopeful. But you guys got involved in that school choice issue. So how did you all help out? How did you all help out with that and get involved?
We got asked by AFP to go and testify at the Capitol. So we both wrote testimonies, which is kind of essentially what we're talking about now, just very shortened. And we went into the initial committee meeting, and we gave our testimonies with actually a lot of other people. And we also kind of just walked around the Capitol and talked to some representatives and kind of tried to get in the door with some people that were going to be on the committee and kind of talk to them and see where they're at. But yeah, the major thing we did was just go in with a lot of other people and give our testimonies and attend the rally that was there.
So what was your kind of core message? Why is greater education freedom important to y'all? I imagine this is the question that you're answering for folks when you meet with like a legislator.
Yeah, I think the reason why it's kind of the core measure, I think, for both Mel and I, was just the fact that it gives everyone the freedom of choice when it comes to schools, because everyone learns differently. And like, we know this because we've been through so many different schools, had different teachers. So it's like, it gives a more appreciation to the fact that not everyone learns the same, not everyone teaches the same. And so it kind of levels the playing ground of like, we want all kids, regardless of who they are, where they come from, to have a good, solid education and not to just get, politics or anything like that thrown at them. Like, we want them to know what the Constitution is, or we want them to know, like, who, Thomas Jefferson was, like, just very basic, fundamental. They don't have to agree with it. And that's kind of the beauty of schools, especially schools we went to, is that we could disagree with the teachers, and they were totally fine with that. They just wanted us to back up our points. And so I think that's something, how we were talking about earlier, how like that's something that's kind of lost in today's age, is that people aren't willing to have good, healthy discussions because they don't actually have the foundations to do that. And I feel like that would boost, everyone's self-esteem, in some respect of like, oh, like, even though this person disagrees, we can still be friends and still talk about it. Like, I have friends, a lot of friends who have absolutely disagree with everything I have to say, but because they can at least have a healthy conversation, or at least pull up, sources that they know, we're able to still remain friends. And so I think that's kind of why it's important to have, freedom of choice when it comes to schools, is that everyone learns different. And there's something to be said about, charter schools, public schools, Montessori schools and everything. And so I think it's important that kids also, like, I'm a rarity where I love school, so I would do school forever. But I also want other kids to maybe not love it as much as me, but at least enjoy and appreciate the fact that we live in America and we do have the option to have this kind of education and to choose like what we want to learn. And then I feel like that love would help them realize like, hey, they can do this. Like, this isn't supposed to be a punishment that we have to go to school forever, but it should be something that you want to learn something new.
Yeah, I think it's such the key to unlocking so much potential. And I'm so glad. I mean, man, the maturity that you all showed in taking a difficult situation where a lot of people have just been like, hey, I got to give up. I can't go to the type of school that I think is going to be the best for me. But you just put your nose to the grindstone and made it happen and worked hard. I think that'll benefit you enormously throughout life. But I give your parents a lot of credit. Me having kids your age, I give your parents a lot of credit for, supporting you and giving that kind of those decision rights to make your own decisions and to let you kind of achieve that big goal. Man, I really appreciate the voice that you're bringing to advocate for greater education freedom in Montana and elsewhere. Well, Ilena and Meleana, thank you so much for joining us. And I love hearing about your story. It was so great.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, folks, hopefully more states will start to pass school choice for their students. But these sisters really have shown us that if something is really important to you, you'll find a way to make it happen. Hey, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And as always, remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.